Good now to you. Hello, good now. This is Rijon with Ryan. I am Ryan Erickson. Surprise, surprise. If you didn't want to see me this morning, oof, too bad for you. But if you did, thank you and welcome to be here today for an episode that we have titled, Should Companies Take Money Off the Table? Why, you ask, is this the topic? Because of the two gentlemen I'm going to invite out of the penalty box and on stage. Had a little bit of a repartee about this a couple weeks ago. We've been trying to arrange this session for a little bit. One of those gentlemen I'm going to bring on stage now, Martin Hinchelwood. Hello, Martin.
Hello, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm just fantastic. You know that because I'm always fantastic. And the second gentleman to bring onto the stage for this conversation today is Mr. Michael Kusters. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
A frequent partner and friend on this particular show that we do here. Well, I do. God, I keep calling it a we. Who is a we anyway? So money. I know, and I have a big, huge deal with saying we like we are not a we until I agree that I am part of this we. You get it? And that's just me. But I'll propose a couple things here. One is that Martin, actually, I'm going to do this one way. Michael, let's go first and say just 10 words or so about who you are, what it is you do, and where. And we'll go to Martin, and then we'll come back to Michael again, and you can give your riff to start us off. So, without further ado, Michael, give me 10 words about your life.
10 words. Okay, that was 2. Okay, so I'm currently COO for one of the pretty important edge networking things. I've had my background in everything IT, computers, love to be full stack developers, been in agile organizational development, and I like to get into a lot of conversations, write a lot of stuff, and yeah, that's my life.
There you go. All right, 10 words for Martin.
Ooh, well, I am professional Scrum trainer, professional Kanban trainer, and I've been a Microsoft MVP in DevOps for the past 15 years. I run my own business called Naked Agility, where I do agile DevOps consulting, coaching, helping people get better at building software and products.
Perfect. Nice. That's 10 words. Okay. Martin gets round 1 for using less words than you did, Michael. So sorry about that. So to set the stage for the conversation again, we're talking about money. The post that you did a couple weeks ago, Michael, had some themes around financial literacy and general, again, I'll leave it there. Financial literacy. Is that enough to guide you into your point of view on that particular topic? Michael, that's you.
Oh, that was my cue. Good, I didn't pick it up.
So I can bring the post up if you want, but it was should companies take money off the table? There's a quote about Alfie Kohn. Dan Ping says, you take money off the table, life is beautiful. And then you came in with a not that. So
exactly. So there's one very interesting proverb I picked up in my student time, and that's everything worth doing is worth overdoing. So that is basically where we get from. So of course, I know that the original intent of Dan Ping is to say that I don't want people to be worried about their livelihood because it distracts them from achieving the things that they're setting out to achieve. And that is not something that we would like to have in a company. But of course, I'm taking this one a bit further, and it's also based a lot on investigation, a lot of experience in organizational transformation, organizational change, observing also from the good old times of being a project manager or a system architect, that the financial conversation is usually very, very hard. And a friend of mine recently also gave this example. So you have this team of developers, they're working in their traditional way of working, and everybody's somehow happy. The salaries are paid, everybody has a stable job, nobody needs to worry anything. And so they have this issue that they're doing 3 releases per year, which is not even once a quarter, but every 3 or 4 months, more like it. And of course, they're always doing work, but then when the release comes, first you come the release packaging, then comes release testing, the debugging, preparing the release coordination, all of those kind of things. And so, does this team have a problem? Yes or no? And a team somehow starts to argue, yeah, you know what, nowadays modern and CI/CD, and we should make the transition. And what do you think the manager understands? Oh, the nerds want a new toy. What does the manager say? No, we've got serious work to do. So what they're failing is the conversation about how much does this process cost us. So we're spending 60 days for a whole team just on the release management, on the release process, every quarter or every 4 months. That is 60 days. Costs how much? Let's just say $1,000 per developer per day. So 60,000 per developer. You have a team of 10 people. We're talking 600,000. 3 times a year, we're talking over $2 million for what? What do we get for that? What is the value we produce? And that is a kind of a different conversation than, yeah, we would like to introduce continuous delivery because it's a better process, because it's more modern. And it's kind of a conversation many people are not able to lead. And because they have never considered how much are we spending on what, and what is the returns that we are getting, because they do not have the literacy to even think in those terms. And what I just told you is really, really, really simple math. 1 developer, 1 day, $1,000. 10 developers is 10,000. 60 days is 600,000. There's no magic to this. It's not like you need to have studied accounting or an MBA in order to do this kind of thing. But people struggle to have this conversation because, like I said, the money for techies has been taken off the table. They are happy. We get a fixed salary. We can live from this salary. We can pay our rent. And where the money comes from or where the money goes, that's my manager's problem. But like that, they are bringing themselves into a situation where they are unable to make the impact that they need to make in order to do the best possible job.
All right. We'll let that sit for a moment. Thank you, Michael. Martin, you had a response to that in public. I'll hang you out there to when you go.
Yeah. So I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with what Michael said. I think he is correct that there is an epidemic of people in organizations that don't understand what their time and their group time costs to the business, costs to the customers. So they're making decisions and making, as you know, Ryan and Michael, but every developer, every person in your organization, all the way up the chain, makes lots of micro decisions every day within the context of what, you know, their knowledge and expertise, that they don't go ask anybody, but they make those decisions. And those decisions cost the business money. And are they making the right decisions or are they making the wrong ones? And I fully agree that they should be making those decisions within the context of understanding what it costs to do business. I used to work on a Scrum team with an Australian company, and we knew that our Scrum team was charged to the customer. So it's a consulting company, so that includes margin as well, for $60,000 a sprint. So, and this was Australian dollars, right? So $60,000 for 2 weeks. So we were looking at every sprint thinking about, well, if the customer's giving us $60,000 and we're doing this work, what are we providing for them? What are we doing next? What's the most valuable thing we can do to spend their $60,000? And that's absolutely key. But I think that is completely unrelated to the Dan Pink story. It might be anecdotally related, as in a manager that sucks or an organization that sucks, and I'm using sucks in a totally bad manner there, but that isn't very good, that doesn't understand these concepts, might equate the two, and thus we end up with the difficult conflation that Michael's talking about. But the idea of me as an employee and my personal outlook on my finances and having enough as an individual with my family, nothing to do with the business, the business that's running, that's a totally different story. That's a personal story to the business operating cost story. Although my personal story of how much I earn and how much is provided to me is a number on the accounting for that, right? But for me, this is a personal story of, if I'm sitting here, this is the Dan Pink idea, if I'm sitting here worried about being able to pay my rent, I'm not going to be focused on solving the business problems. I'm going to be focused on worrying to pay my rent. Me having enough, so I'm not worried about the extrinsic motivations and can focus on the intrinsic motivations of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, does not preclude me understanding how much I and my team and the work that we're doing costs to the business or the customers. They should definitely understand that stuff. But I think my belief is they're too I'm going to say they're two unrelated and separate stories. However, the outcome of the personal story is a line item on the accounting on the other story, if that makes sense. That's the way I think about it.
Actually, in this one, and this may be my personal take here, I have a company too. How do you separate me as a person from the company I run? It's probably pretty difficult, because I identify as this company, and this company exists because of me. If this company is in financial trouble, so am I, and the other way around. So for me as a business owner, it is absolutely natural that every financial decision, every product decision, every development decision I have to take from two angles. Even the question, do I go into the cloud? Do I rent a VM? Do I host this stuff by myself? Is made from a perspective of this one. Ultimately, it hits my pocket. So I have a different way of making decisions than I would have as an employee who doesn't care where the bill gets sent and how big it is. And even you have this, I mean, I'm joking in this one because what we're talking about is $5 or $10, but still the point stays that if you have financial responsibility for your own business because it affects you personally, you make different decisions than if it's completely detached.
Sure, but that's not an employee issue. That's a business owner issue. And there is only one or two or three of you in a particular business, maybe a little bit more depending on the scale of the business. And then there's hundreds of other people who are the people doing the work that actually don't care about that story explicitly, because the success of that story for you as a business owner lines your pocket. It does nothing for the employees. But if the business makes 100 million more profit this year, I don't get any more as an employee in my paycheck in most companies, unless there's profit share, right? But as a business owner, and as a business owner myself, I do separate those things, right? My success as a business owner means I earn more money, right? Because it's my business. So, but I need to be conscious as a business owner that that's not how my employees think, and that's not how they're supposed to think. And even all of that doesn't preclude those employees taking care of the pennies and pounds. A great example of this is what they've done in Jaguar Land Rover recently. So one of the things that they found, they were doing a bunch of analysis on why did this disaster happen. They had a disaster that cost them something like $200-300 million, and the fundamental root cause of this problem was an aging machine that was creating slightly faulty parts. Like, they were good enough, but not good enough long term, so they had to be replaced later, and that was much more expensive. And this machine was run by a person, and they asked that person, why didn't you request a new machine? And they're like, I've requested a new machine every year for the past 5 years. But what happened in that story is that request went up in the organization to somebody who it wasn't in their budget for this year, because perhaps they were, looking after the shareholders, right? And we want to have a certain amount, so we can't afford $5 million for a new machine, and they would deny that request. So the change that they made in the organization was they now allow every single person in the organization to approve any amount of spend. And that sounds ridiculous. That sounds like people within the organization will just start spending money willy-nilly, and you're then hemorrhaging cash. But they created this understanding of kind of spend it like it's your own money, right? Would you spend this money on this thing? And that's orthogonal, but related to what it is we're talking about, right? That we want the people doing the work, regardless of whether they are owners in the business or not. If you're doing work, if you're making decisions, you want them making decisions with the understanding of the context, the operating context of the business, the costs that we're running, and things that are happening. And I absolutely, one thing I totally agree with you, Michael. I see time and again, especially in professional services organizations, where they seem to deliberately shield the people doing the work from the costs of the work. I was just working in an organization where I think we had the group that I was in, there was about 150 people working with the customer, right? And this is mega ridiculous cost. You probably would talk about an operating cost per day of about $2,500 to $2,500, maybe $3,000 to the customer, right? So $3,000 a day per person, 150 people. That's more than holy crap. That's like just more than 400,000. My math in my head sucks, Michael. Sorry. It's more than 400,000 per day. It's a lot of money. And what were they getting for it? People were sitting doing make work because they couldn't think of what to do, but they didn't fundamentally understand the cost of the business. They didn't understand what they were being charged to the business, to the customer. They didn't understand how much money they were burning just sitting there not doing anything for a day. So they weren't making decisions with context. And it's that context that's important. And I very much agree that lots of businesses think that they have to shield their staff from the cost of actually doing business. And I think that's wrong.
Exactly. And that is the point where I said, this is the point where I said that, look, really, and I was teasing with this post, quoting Dan Pink, take the money off the table, of course, because this is the point where it goes wrong. When you run your business and say, I do not want, for any reason whatever, not picking out anything, my employees to know the financial impact of what they are doing, at that point, you're hurting your own business. You cannot run a successful business if you're surrounded by people who don't know the consequences of their actions from a financial perspective.
I guess then I really don't understand why you put Dan Pink on the table, because they're completely unrelated things, right? So I know you're saying you're teasing, right? But even when you're teasing, if you're making an analogy between two things, they have to be the same thing, and I think they're fundamentally not the same thing. And that's what triggered me to reply, right? Is that because I guess I got suckered. I'm easy to be triggered, right? I have an Asperger's coach, and helps me very much on not poking at things. But for some, when they're apps, the issue I have is not that when you're equating these two things that are radically different, even in kind of in jest, right? It's not for the likes of us who are practitioners within this space, who could potentially fully understand that, oh yeah, Michael's just taking a rip at Dan Pink to try and get engagement and talk about the topic and
tweak his views.
Yeah, but pull it apart a little bit. But what about all of the people out there who stumble upon your post and what they read? And if they read your post and they're not in that context of understanding these concepts, they're going to read Dan Pink's ideas are crap. They're not what we want to be looking at, and we should disregard everything he's talking about. That's what I feel that they would hear, which is why I quite often, Ryan will know this because we follow each other as well. I quite often reply to posts based on that context, right? I'm not actually replying to the person who made the post. I'm replying to all the other people who would read that post, and maybe at least I can save some percentage of them from getting the wrong end of the stick. That's a British idiom. What's wrong end of the stick? Would be getting the wrong idea, right?
Yeah,
misinterpreting the joke as a reality. Yeah. And I think it's very easy to make those conflations that result. What's the dual track agile? That's a really famous one, right? Where are you familiar with dual track agile?
Yeah.
So dual track agile, it's this idea. Sorry.
Go ahead and go dual track agile.
Agile means the ability to do the right thing at the right time. So dual track is let's have the ability to sometimes do the right thing. Isn't that better than doing it all the time?
Yeah. This is dual track agile was essentially this paper talking about this idea that there are two types of work, right? You've got discovery work and you've got delivery work. And you need to do both, and the same people need to ebb and flow between that work, depending on how, if you don't know about something, you're going to spend more time on that discovery track. If you know a lot about it and you're just executing on it, you'll maybe spend a little bit more time on that delivery track. But lots of people read that and then post about dual track agile being you need a delivery team and a discovery team, and they end up being two completely separate teams. And then we all have to spend a whole bunch of time and effort explaining to people that no, that when people say that, that's not what it was talking about. You end up having to explain away those issues. And I just felt that there was a danger in the comment that you made of that similar idea happening, that disconnect between your intent and what we want to help people understand, and what Dan Pink was trying to help people understand, which is that intrinsic, extrinsic motivation thing, which is separate from that business operating cost as part of the context that every employee should understand.
Interestingly, I would say, yeah, I am not so sure that, how to say, and like you say, maybe business owners are a little bit different than the regular employees in the question of should money be a motivating factor? But then I even come back to the concept, how can you promote entrepreneurship not entrepreneurship, but intrapreneurship, if your employees don't have this mindset.
Which mindset are we talking about? Because there's the mindset of they're happy and successful and feel like they can spend more time focusing on the work because we've taken money off the table at home, versus the business focus of we need to understand the financial motivations within the context of business for business. And I don't think that piece is any different between an employee and a business owner, right?
It shouldn't be. If we can agree that it shouldn't be, I'm with you. The problem is in practice, it too often is very, very different.
Why is it? Why does that happen? I've got an idea on
that. It's a very good question. Ultimately, I mean, just look, you brought this up that the employee, they do not think like the business owner. So, yes, I agree with you. So I do agree. I mean, I was thinking about this one from my own perspective. I used to be an employee for a long number of years. And when I transitioned into freelancing, into being a business owner, this shift, it took me I would say 3 or 4 years to start thinking differently. I mean, in part, it is like you said, because as an employee, there are other people making this decision for me. I used to work for a company where I was out of the loop. I did not know the company's finances, except for, oh, yeah, we don't have enough money for a raise.
Mm-hmm. So this, go ahead. I think you were going to come back in there.
Yeah, I think there's a fundamental why here that's really important, which is why historically that thing that we're talking about has happened, that that businesses have systematically and deliberately disconnected their employees from the financial runnings of the business. And it's fundamentally so that they don't discover what their colleagues are being paid, because they pay them differently. I had this exact circumstance. I used to work for a little company called Merrill Lynch. You might have, no, it was not fun, Ryan. Was not fun. I was subprime mortgage as well, so it was even worse. Pre 2008. So I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and I offhandedly, not even thinking of the ramifications, offhandedly said, "Oh, we'd all just got our bonuses and pay rises and stuff." And I offhandedly said, "Oh, now I'm in the 40% tax bracket. That's going to kind of suck, right?" And my colleague, who did exactly the same job as me, was incredibly pissed because they were nowhere near that 40% tax bracket.
Yeah.
So they go to their boss, and I get into trouble rather than them getting into trouble for not paying them properly. I get into trouble for letting slip. Funnily enough, that was in 2007, and in 2008 in the UK that became protected speech, right? Because in many places, everybody should be talking to this is part of how we break this cycle, Michael, is that every employee should be talking to each other about the financial stories. How much do we earn should be open information within an organization. It absolutely should. And I think in most states in the US is now, isn't it protected speech as well? Or is it federally protected? I think it might be federally protected. You're as an employer, you're not allowed to say to your employees, you can't tell each other about. If you don't want to, you're not forced to talk about it, right?
Yeah, I'd have to check into the legality of it. But it seems like it would be a more company to company kind of compliance issue. I'm not sure if there are regulations there.
I'm almost federally protected.
That's again, this is completely BS as far as I'm concerned. I think as far as you're concerned, what I was going to say is, going to Michael's point and then coming back, when you become a contract, when you have your own business, what are you? You're independent. Well, what does that mean? You are dependent on yourself for your financial awareness and your business acumen, that kind of those things. But when you are employed by a company who has the financial information and controls the compensation about who they decide where you are ranked, what are you? You're dependent. It creates a dependency relationship. And then I think that was evidenced, Martin, by that situation, is that, oh, well, we're dependent on this other person to give, well, hey, boss, Martin's telling me this. And then you're seeking some other authority as opposed to having a conversation where the structure is set up for you to have that conversation.
And I agree with you. I mean, we Ryan and I both went on the same masterclass, so we know. The reality is, in many organizations, though, that you do have that situation, even with the best intentions of leadership. When it comes down to salaries and stuff, you normally, I'm not saying it's the right, I'm not saying it's good, but you normally end up in that hierarchy issue with line management and discussions of salary, perhaps with HR, right? And I think that does fundamentally have to change. I think I don't fully understand what that would look like in an ideal world, and maybe there is no ideal and it's company to company and that kind of thing. But I did see, who was the web guy from New York that used to be very active. I think he's retired now. He had a company and he published all of his salaries for all of his employees were published internally in the organization, and they had levels.
It wasn't Ray Dalio, was it?
I can't remember, but
not a web guy, but
this was an engineering. They were a software development company, and it was very interesting. And he would open source that story, right, and say, here's the story, here's what I'm thinking, and actually publish it publicly. And then say, what do you think? Is this going to work? What are the things that might not work? And I think that kind of open discussion, I don't understand where the closed salary discussion comes from. Me personally, and this is a Martin thing, I'm quite happy to tell anybody what I earn, right? But I definitely feel like most people feel like it's secret information.
Well, yeah.
And I'm not sure where that comes from.
There's also there's also a cultural element to this. I know that in Germany, there's this proverb, you don't talk about money, you have it. But literally, that is part of the problem, that the business owners who have access to the money, they don't talk about it so that other people don't know. And like you already mentioned, it creates a dependency, it creates a power slope. And even bringing this one back to the point of taking the money off the table, as a regular employee, will I ever know whether I am being paid enough to be silent or whether I am being paid as much as I am worth? How do I find out? For that one, I need to understand what my contribution to the company is. Because if I understand this, I can argue, look, because of me, you're making 50 million. How about my share is just 2 of that? It's an entirely different story of, I would like a raise, but financial situation is difficult.
Well, perhaps the employee-employer relationship has had its time. Right? Perhaps it should be business owner to business owner relationship, and everybody we hire in our organization is. I always found it weird, and this Ryan won't get this, and I'm not sure what happens in Germany. I found it weird, Ryan, that I had to do my tax returns when I went to the US. In the UK, you don't do a tax return. A normal employee does not do a tax return. It's done for you by your company and the taxman.
Why?
Okay.
Yeah,
because that's how it's done here. Same reason we don't have sales tax, and it's all included in the price you pay. The price on the ticket is the price you pay, right? the salary I get is the salary I get, and I don't have to worry about how much tax I've paid. I don't have to. That's all taken care of by your employer, right?
Actually,
How does that differ? So this is very interesting. I had no idea. How does that differ in Germany, Michael?
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting. The taxes is probably it's been a running gag for a long time that sometimes politicians like to advertise that one. It was like 10 years ago. They said that maybe we should simplify the tax system so that your tax form fits on a beer stamp. But this never happened. If I would show you the tax forms, and literally every single German has to do their tax form every year, and it's a science. Literally, it takes you about a day just because of how complicated it is. And how to say, in Germany, you tell your employer your envisioned gross salary. But that doesn't mean that that is your net salary. So what is transferred to you on your bank account is about half of that. And depending on which tax bracket you are and whether you're single, married, have children or more, it could be a bit more than half, a bit less than half. The problem is that this one already creates the first level where people feel treated very, very unfairly. Because in Germany, you have two levels of tax. One is the tax that you pay as an employee, and the other is the level of tax that the employer pays. And I like to say, I run a business. I charge my customer 100 euros. From those 100 euros, I, as a private person, can spend about 30. The rest goes to the government in one form or another. So as an employer, I always see the 100 euro that I need to make in order to pay myself as an employee those 30 euros. As an employee, and there was even one comedian in Germany who made this joke, that he said that it's a bit schizophrenic running a one-person company. As an employer, you say my employees, they're asking too much money, and as an employee, you say my employer is ripping me off.
But I think Michael, by default, if you're just an employee in Germany and you have no special circumstances, the company does your tax return.
No.
Correct?
No, they file. Of course, they legally have to do, but you still have to take care of your tax returns by yourself. The company is not involved in this process.
Okay, that's not the information I have over here. It just says that you may want to file tax returns, but you don't have to. So in the UK, I can file as an employee. I can file a tax return if I want to, but by default, if I'm only working for one company, Ryan, if I only have one employer, then they know everything about my incoming finances. So unless I have any other things that I need to declare, I can just let the company file my tax returns on my behalf, and that's a legal obligation of theirs within the UK. So they pay the employees' tax. What's actually really interesting is companies shield from employees that other piece that Michael's talking about, because you have the cost of the employee, right? From the perspective of the employee, like I know I get paid X amount and my tax is this amount, but what you don't see is the employer's liability tax as well.
Workers' compensation and federal programs and all that stuff that we have here in the US.
And even like we pay something called national insurance, which is like Social Security in the US, which used to be for a specific thing and now is just tax, right? And there's employees' contributions and employers' contributions, and the employers' contributions is higher. So staff don't normally see, or even staff, employees, not business owners, just pure employees, don't normally have any visibility on what they actually cost the business.
Exactly.
And yeah, that's weird.
Well, and I think this comes down to a basic. So we're talking about individual incentivization, right?
Yeah.
And I think this, and Michael, you brought Alfie Kohn into the conversation with that too, and And Alfie, as you know, and Martin, I think you know this too from where we've been talking about in Beta Codex and all that stuff, is that individual incentives are demotivating, the punished by rewards kind of thing. And I think this is, pardon?
Employee of the month is one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, well, and this, I think we're coming down to this. Okay, so my individual tax burden is this. What am I contributing to that? All that conversation becomes null and void when a small group of employees in this area are managing a business in and of themselves with their own profit and loss statement. They're managing that, again, different. It's a different relationship in kind, in terms of, it doesn't necessarily matter, what all of us, no one person creates value on their own. And I think that is a big concept, because I need both of you to create value in whatever I'm doing. And then on the variable compensation is top of that. But if you raise, and I'll lead there, but the baseline base compensation, if you pay people fairly and pay them well, then that quote, I think this is a Deming quote. I think that is actually, I was trying to find it in my Deming quote.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. But I think it's really interesting though, Ryan, that suddenly we're starting to have a conversation just about capitalism, right? The elephant in the room, right? That in the system within which we operate, that we're all operating, is fundamentally about a small group of people gathering large amounts of wealth, right? Because the wealth flows from the people who don't get paid very much, but we make a lot of profit on the people that are not. And rather than paying them better, the wealth flows up to that one person at the top, right? The CEO with the multi-million-dollar salary for whatever reason, but they're taking a lot of risk. But are they really taking $100 million worth of risk, right? Personal risk? Not really, right? And I think that idea that we were kind of the employer-employee relationship, if every person in the story was their own boss, right? You basically got there are a bunch of boutique individuals who are selling themselves for how much they think they're worth, and doing their own taxes and doing their own thing, and understanding at that part of the business, like you're saying, Ryan, doing profit and loss for that part of the business.
Yeah.
I think the reason we don't have that systemically is because those people would be absolutely aghast at the levels of profit that they generate, that's money that's going somewhere else that they don't get, right?
Exactly.
So it's beholden to the business to hide that. It's not really hide, it's a virtual hide. Make it what's the
obtuse,
not see through, opaque.
Opaque.
As opaque as they can, so that employees don't get upset that, why am I doing this work and making you 100 million when you're only paying me 50 grand, right?
And again, it's not like each individual, I need to have 98% of that. Our team makes X and I need that. I think, and this is capitalism is not evil. Capitalism, what we have, creating value, is not evil. I think there's this bifurcation. Well, okay, right. So there's this bifurcation of, it has to be one way or the other. Either we're this socialist, hippy-dippy commune folks, but some folks bring it. But yeah, I agree with that. There's a way to say
the Nordics
have individual.
The Nordics are fairly good at creating that bifurcation where you've got, and America used, what was the 1970s under a Republican government? What was the max tax bracket? I think it was 70%.
Yeah, there was 75% tax bracket. Yeah. Well, I think there was a 90% tax bracket back in the FDR days.
We had a thing in the UK that was really interesting, had a really interesting effect at one point. I think it was in the 80s or early 90s. I can't 100% remember, so somebody would need to look it up and validate it. But we had a whole bunch of companies that were making unbelievably ridiculous amounts of profit. And they were doing revenue extraction, not value creation. They were extracting massive amounts of revenue from effectively from the economy. And it was damaging the entire economy, the amount of money they were taking out and taking overseas and doing all of those kind of things. So they created something, I can't remember which government, it was probably a Labour government because it sounds not like something the Conservatives here would do. But they created something called the windfall tax. And the windfall tax said, if your business makes over 500 million in profit, everything over that is 100% tax. That was the windfall tax. And it forced all of these companies to start going, we don't want to pay the tax. So what should we do with this money instead? Perhaps we should invest it in our infrastructure. Perhaps we should invest it in our people. Perhaps we should invest it in the things that we're doing to generate value within our context. And it encouraged people to do that. And I thought it was a, I'm not saying that would work now, but it was a very interesting dynamic that happened as part of that story.
And very, very interesting in terms of regulatory impact of that. Well, now we have that regulation, then the folks who have been getting the ill-gotten gain from before that regulation might hire capable and intelligent tax accountants to say, how might we shield that profit and put it somewhere else? I mean, and we've talked about that, but
right, it ends up with a lot of whack-a-mole, because you don't have this problem in the US, Ryan, but we've got a 1,000+ year-old tax system in Europe for most of the countries. So there's all kinds of weird stuff in European law and European, just in the countries, right, in the tax law and the things that are very hard to close because they've just been there for so long, and the things have superseded them, but then they find this way of loopholing something. I know you have that in the States as well, but when you've got 1,000 years of tax law, it's worse.
250 is different than 1,000 or more. Michael, I think you're going to hop in there in a moment or two ago. I don't know if that's okay, but if
I mean, the entire conversation about tax is very interesting because it somehow closes the loop between the economy as the global system, the company as, how to say, our system of work, and me as an individual with even, how to say, my family, my close circle as my personal system of control, I would say. But how to say, I would say one of the key issues when we are talking about those is even the system that we are operating in. We can always reframe it, and we just reframed it by saying, let's talk about tax, let's talk about capitalism as a whole. And even this, when we bring this one back to the point where we're coming from, is what kind of decisions do we want whom to make? Because what we were talking about, Martin, with this one, the 500 million, the windfall tax, is literally the big decisions made by some of the big corporate players, which is
that's really high level.
1% of the population, and how to say, what we need to talk about, and that is why I was bringing up the entire point, is and I think that is fully within the spirit of anything that any one of us is promoting. I would like all those kind of decisions to be more decentralized, to have everybody involved in a decision, everybody being able to talk at face level rather than I am on the top, that's why I'm telling you, and then you tell your people and then they tell their people. Face level conversations are the way that we can change this system. So what we need to create is a system not only where the face level conversation is possible, but where people do have a self-interest in saying, I want to join this conversation.
Yep. And Ryan has a lovely diagram behind his head right there. getting to some of those ideas. It doesn't have all the answers, but it definitely is definitely a structure that can be. I think you're absolutely right, but I think it only comes with that idea of the cell-based structure of the profit and loss at each level that we just don't fundamentally have now. I worked with a company in Norway, and it's a French company, but I worked with the Norwegian department, and they had a product that cost a lot of money to make, 650 people working on it every day. And the product owner for that product had no visibility of how much that product cost to build. None at all. So the way I know exactly the way it was organized was that there was I think it was 13 technology centers in 9 different countries, and each technology center invested their own money in features for the product. So profit and loss was all country based in these 9 different countries, and the product owner and management for the product had zero visibility on, because they're not allowed to see the profit and loss for the division in this other country. That's not allowed within the context of this big hierarchical oil and gas business, right? But that fundamental lack of visibility is part of the problem, right?
Yes.
And it's not. I think we're losing sight of the big picture, though, because it's not just money that's the problem. I mean, we're talking about money in the context here is money, but I worked with a car company, and they couldn't get, in order to get telemetry data from all of the cars in existence, right, to get access to some of the telemetry data, it took 6 to 8 months of request forms and getting the data. And the person I was speaking to had colleagues in Tesla who could just go, tick, 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 there's the data, right? And then we can make decisions based on what's actually happening out in the world.
Now, in that example, did they have visibility, understanding of why Tesla was functioning that way, and what was it about that organization that was different? I kind of know what it is, but what was their organization of it?
I mean, I think Tesla is a funny beast that doesn't fit into any particular category because, and I think all of Elon's companies are the same, right? That there's, and probably Apple was the same under Jobs, right? There's a little bit of cult of personality driving the decision making rather than policy based decision making, which is how most organizations, and I say most, Ryan, for sure, most organizations. Well, what could you tell me what you think?
Well, I think, I don't know whether this came from a talk I saw with Joe Justice, because I know he had been involved there and some background knowledge. But what I understand is that they kind of have APIs between their different teams, that there are agreements of how this team deals with that team and that team deals with the other teams, and those are not mandated. And that if I have a rules of engagement for my cell, as it were, and you have it for your cell, and we serve these different needs, that information can flow much more freely because we have that kind of relationship. And I think that also may be true of the actual hardware of the vehicles, and that how that is assembled, is that we can assemble different parts in different ways. But if our interaction protocols if we have a good understanding of the interaction protocols, then we will have the ability to get information back and forth effectively without having to translate and make legible why we are doing what we were doing in order to satisfy some need for status level control, and as opposed to going based on value creation.
But I think Neil talked about this a little bit when we did the masterclass. He talked about I mean, maybe it wasn't Nils, maybe it was, because I was speaking to somebody else about I'm trying to get my brain in gear. They were talking about you need to have a sponsor for whatever changes you're making in the organization. If you want to make those types of changes, you need a sponsor that's senior enough. I don't think it was Nils. It was Open Space Beta. It was Open Space Agile. It was the Open Space Agile.
Dan Mezek. Open space
That,
agility.
yes,
Yeah.
that's who I was speaking to. And he was talking about the hard part is getting somebody senior enough. And I like Nils's comment that if you're talking to somebody and they're like, oh, I've got to go ask somebody, you're not talking to somebody senior enough, right? But the difficulty in doing that with smaller organizations is easy. Doing that with large organizations was hard. I when I worked at Merrill Lynch, my boss was a project manager. His boss was a regional director, a business regional director, and there were 11 people above him.
Yeah.
So like at some point in an organization like that, management is effectively bean counting, right? There's not actually any understanding of the work being done. We don't care about the work being done. It's numbers and spreadsheets and profit, and that's all we care about.
Yeah,
And
management by remote control.
I had a great, I'm throwing in a lot of things, but I had a great conversation with somebody at a conference years ago who he asked me what I did. And I said, I help organizations that are screwed get unscrewed. Right? That's effectively, well, that's what we do, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
And he said, why? And I said, I don't know. He said, you should just let them die. Go find a company that's not like that and make it successful, and ignore the companies that have that, because they're not fundamentally going to change. It does feel a lot, Ryan, like we're peeing upwind, I think is the expression, peeing into the wind, right?
Yeah, a chaotic, or as someone say, quixotic quest. You're tilting at windmills, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just so hard to actually help people, to actually make change in organization. Is it worth actually making the change? And then with the effort, and then I think about organizations like Microsoft, right? That while certainly not awesome on these things, has made massive changes in the fundamental way they do business over the last 10 years. That has enabled them to take advantage of many of the things that we talk about. Not all of the things that they're still a big hierarchical organization, right?
How many? 50,000, 150,000? Well, I'm trying to think how many people in total.
How many people? You need a 2 in front of that and an extra 0.
Yeah,
it's 200,000 people.
200,000
people in Microsoft. But if you think about it as a group of businesses, which is why Google changed, right? That's what and this is my. I'm not saying it's why Google changed, it's why I think Google changed, right? That they changed to a venture capitalist company, Alphabet, because they realized that you just can't change at scale, and what's better is you kill the old companies and start new companies. Start new efforts, kill old efforts, right? And yeah.
It's a decentralizing pattern, but it's kind of like big, kind of moving solar systems out of the galaxy instead of moving planets to different parts of the solar system, kind of thing. So and maybe this is about the arc of history. If we each as individuals, we are where we are when we are there, working and living within a Microsoft, a Merrill Lynch, a IBM, or name your behemoth. And are you choosing to be a force for good or force for evil, but a force for changing the system and intervening in the system and standing up for something that there is a way that we could be we's and do more and be more, and not only for the employees and human relations, big deal, make the employees feel happy and then still extract the universe, but to actually have people in relationship with one another, in relationship with the customer, in service of a greater good for the company and for the society. Because I think we got in from individual versus team, and then we also, when we started talking about taxes, you're talking about, wow, what is our responsibility as individuals also to the legal and governance structure around us.
Isn't what we're talking about here very similar to a cooperative?
Similar.
Right.
It's kind of a new kind of beast. I think we have to think of some new kind of animal, because the language around what we're talking about becomes, oh, are you talking about this? Are you talking about that?
Because I know there's a new type of company that they've just created, a new type of company in the US, like an official, you can put it on the form.
A B Corp?
Company. It's a low profit company.
Yeah, I think those would become B Corps.
Yeah, I don't know the exact terminology.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting, and I think it's the future. But how quickly do we get there? I think it's going to be really, really difficult, because we still have. I mean, existentially, we still have to get over the universal income hump as well, which is we've not got over it yet. It's going to be a really interesting decade.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and this is all, we're not talking about, I mean, there's ways to think about this that are not either or, that are better for, it's not universal basic income, which is like everybody gets this and no one gets and more, and there's no variable compensation. But I think the idea of variable and hey, we're talking about money, so we can talk about compensation. I think compensation and motivation was one of the things we were, again, with talk about Dan Pink, you're bringing that in there. But so if I trust you, if I respect you, and we're in this love together, if we're there with it, then we can talk about compensation. What are our relative compensation? What is our contribution to this group, each other? And you can't have that in a 50-person organization among 50 people, but you can have it among 5 to 7 or 8. And so I think that it's a different model of compensation and financial management that you have to be willing to suspend your disbelief and have a dialogue with someone who has sponsorship authority to make the kind of change that we're talking about.
It's difficult to get enough snowball to make these sorts of things viable, because the where all the money is in these big behemoth organizations, and these big behemoth organizations don't want to deal with the 7 or 8 person company, because then, oh crap, I'm going to have to, if we have 1,000 7 or 8 companies we've got to deal with, I've got to do 1,000 invoices a month. But if I go to Accenture, I only have 1 invoice a month. I'm done, right? And there's a how would you describe it? There's a local optimization where they want to minimize their invoicing costs. That's
a tactical problem, though.
I know, but problem that can be solved. It's a tactical problem, but they make a strategic initiative, right?
It is extremely relevant, and even though it might be disclosing a bit too much of some confidential stuff that's going on my end, but this is exactly some of the stuff that we are doing. We are operating with some of the world's best players in their field, and let's just say, I don't want to name any big consulting, but those people do not work for big consulting. They have their own business. So if you want them all together, you do not have a choice. You have to go saying that, where do we find the right people?
I think there's two different sorts of consulting, right? And I'm definitely polarizing here, putting things in buckets, which I fully admit I'm happy to do, right? Polarizing, always fun, right? There's 2 types of people in the world: those that understand binary, right?
Scots and
so but I feel like there's 2 main types of consulting. There's the big consulting, like the Accentures and Infosys and I don't know, pick your
BCG, McKinsey, Deloitte.
you know, a lot of people don't realize how long McKinsey's been around, right? I think they're coming up on their centenary, and the damage they've done. I really recommend. What's the book called?
The Big Con.
Big Con. Yeah, that one. Awesome book.
Mariana Mazzucato. Yes.
Yeah. Those types of consultants tend to be about fulfilling consultancy. Like, consultancy is the point. We want to take over parts of your business and we will run it for you because it's more efficient, more cost effective for us to run it, because we've got 100 people in a room that can do your invoicing for you, right? But the reality is that outsourcing those things results in a company's inability to adapt to change because they're reliant upon this other system. My favorite example is anything to do with SAP, right? As soon as you bring in SAP, or let's double down, and Microsoft's got a SAP Compete, whatever the heck it's called.
Great Plains.
No, it's not called that anymore, but yeah, it was called Great Plains. As soon as you bring in somebody else's business model that you have to follow, you're limiting your ability to change. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Sometimes we accept small limitations, like we might use Azure DevOps to hold our work items, or we might use Jira, or we might use that. That's a small. What's the opposite of optimization? Unoptimization, disoptimization. Whatever that word is.
It's just a compromise.
Yeah, you're right. We compromise our ability to change a little bit in order to streamline something. And when you do it at the small scale, like we're going to store our work items in Azure DevOps, awesome. Pretty high benefit for pretty low limitation, right? Until it's not, and then you change. But when it's something as systemic as our entire procurement platform that goes to every part of the business, it then makes it really difficult to change, because any change is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to get it to change. It's an optimization that creates this inability to change, right?
Yeah,
And
a friend of mine said one time that he hates, let's not name the company, this one with a passion, because he said that once you bring them on board, it's easier to kill your business and start a new company than to get rid of them again.
Yeah, and I think I count the big consultancies and big software in that category. And I guess there's software that maybe doesn't count in that category. Like doing Office 365 or Google probably doesn't, because it doesn't impose process on you, right? It just provides capability. You can decide how you use it. But it's where you cross that line into imposing upon your business practices.
Actually, in this one, I think that one of the key challenges that companies face is they buy these things as a commodity and don't realize that what they are onboarding is not a commodity, but a business model.
Yeah, they're and when you install somebody else's business model, what makes you different from that somebody else? And that's
exactly, you lose this differentiating factor. And I remember working many years ago with a telco operator who said that literally, I mean, you as a customer, you take your phone. In the end, does it matter for you? You go to AT&T, you go to T-Mobile, you go to Dell, whatever. It doesn't matter to you. So what's the discriminating factor for you as a customer? The price tag. What defines a price tag? Process efficiency. But if all three of them have the same process, how's that supposed to work?
So to bring this all the way back to our original question, right? Should companies take money off the table and understanding the cost? It's not just the employees not understanding the cost of what their costs to doing the work. It's everybody who's a decision maker in the organization understanding the cost of not doing a thing, and also the long-term cost. Like if you take SAP and replace your procurement processes with a SAP equivalent, what's the cost to change later if you decide you want to change? And how likely is that cost to change to happen? And I think people don't make decisions with that level of foresight.
And why? Why don't they? So my opinion about why, I agree that those decisions are not made with that level of information.
I know why too.
Why? Well, yeah. Well, yeah, we all know why, but yeah, we might not agree. But again, if you take obscurity off the table, what do you have? You have transparency. And if you are open book, all the information is there. If the information is distributed in an effective and free fashion, then you can make the decisions, and then you can agree. And there's certain frames about making group decision making is a whole other issue, but I think it's transparency.
There's an additional piece on that, Ryan, and that's I've been there's a marketing guy who I've been watching about. I think he's actually a psychologist, but he talks a lot at marketing forums, but he's a psychologist. And what he talks about is mathematics taking decision making off the table. And people look at the cold, hard numbers and make a decision based on the numbers, because then they didn't have to make a decision. The numbers made the decision for them.
Oh God, that's evil.
And they don't have to take accountability for that decision because the numbers made that decision for them.
Yeah, and that goes into another whole thing. And interesting. It'd be interesting to hear who that person is and what the rationale is.
Yeah.
I thought as soon as you said cold hard cash, Michael's ears would perk up and she would show up on screen like, oh my God, I want to talk about the numbers. Yes, yeah, that's you. I'm talking to you.
It's informed decision making, not do the decision making for you.
Yes.
I talk a lot about numbers and telemetry and evidence-based management and all of those things. But ultimately, we're playing poker, not chess, right? And we don't have all of the information. We have some of the information and some of it's hidden. And we're trying to use our intuition based on the data that we have to make the best decision possible within the context, and then we see whether we're right. Maybe we need to make a different decision. And it's I'm trying to get that that guy for you, because it's
actually
there he is.
There's something very similar I'm following, and that is how to say one of the startups I'm involved in is literally to make the information of an entire organization available and use a management framework to support decision making. Like you say, I'm not taking the decisions away from people, because I do not believe that mathematics can have the full understanding of what is going on, but saying, let's take all the data that you have. How fast can you, as a manager of a 10,000 people organization, process everything that's going on? You can't. There's more happening in real time than you can catch up with. But with AI, you can catch up, you can use algorithms, you can use machine learning to figure out what's going on and say, those are things that you have to pay attention to, and that is noise. And based on what we know, what's going on, those are decisions that are likely to bring you in the direction of the goals that you want to pursue. And those things are the things that you have to address. Otherwise, you're not going to reach your goal. And I'm building this kind of thing with a team, with AI, and it's really fancy stuff. But this is the organization that I want, that everybody in the company has access to the information and decisions they need so that they can make them without meeting madness.
Well, absolutely, and I think the important thing is that this is a tool that's fit for purpose, and that when and also this is, I think this is another thing that Deming has said that if there is fear involved in what the numbers are stating, if there's people have fear of loss or this incentive to gain based on what numbers they're individually responsible for reporting, then those numbers are going to be lies. They're just going to be lies. And instead, but I like the idea of, okay, the machines understand the numbers, right? If the algorithms and the calculations are also freely open, and that if you want to see how those decisions are made, how those tabulations are done, and what you're measuring, if it can be measured objectively and put out there for the actual carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and spirit beings to make sense of, as opposed to the silicon and electricity beings, then I think we can hold hands and talk about, again, like Martin, like you're also saying, is that making informed decisions and making decisions quickly with as good of information as we have.
Actually, I would say that one of the key challenges, have your turn soon. One of the key challenges we face with decision making is that there's always uncertainty. So what we can only talk about is bets. Every business decision is a bet, not a fact, because we don't know until we tried it, and probabilities. But there are things that we know that most likely will not give you what you're looking for, and things that are pretty likely to give you what you're looking for. And there are patterns we've observed for many years, and we can see if we can spot patterns. And if we say that you're on this pattern, then we can say, okay, this is the kind of advice I would provide for you. Because literally, as a consultant, that's what I do. I am trying to figure out what the patterns are that are going on in your organization. And I'm saying that, okay, based on what I've seen before, this could work. This is probably not going to work. If you want to try it, you can still try it. It's your choice. But let me make a prediction of the outcome. And if you're good as a consultant, then I would say that at least 2/3 of the time, you're pretty on spot. Maybe not fully accurate, but pretty on spot. And this is the thing that in many organizations is going wrong, that most decisions are made without an understanding of where does this lead us. It's just, okay, we have these meetings, we need to talk about this topic, let's make the decision. But what's going to happen? Nobody knows.
And again, realizing that we're at time, Martin, I know you have to be out of here. A great conversation, both of you gentlemen. Michael, I also want to bring you here to say some words. Martin, is there anything you wanted to say here, bring forth, that you have not yet had a chance to do?
No, I think the context is really important, and don't shield people from that context in your organization for what is in effect selfish reasons, right? I want to hide the information of how much the team costs because I don't want members of the team to find out they don't get paid very much. That's a selfish reason. That's not a good reason to hide those costs and limit people's ability to make decisions and reduce the effectiveness of those decisions, because it's just not good enough. But on the other side, don't confuse Dan Pink's story of taking money off the table with that story of the corporate context, the business context, the personal story of people who are individuals and want to be able to make the best they can of things, that intrinsic focus on those intrinsic things of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And we want to enable that from the context of our business, but don't compromise the context and knowledge and understanding and transparency of your business in order to support that, right? Have both. Have both. Is what
yeah. Show nuance, show grace, show respect. Sounds like human things. Michael, would you like to drop in with your final thoughts before we head out?
Actually, I can only say I fully agree with Martin. And despite the seeming conflict, this is exactly the point that I wanted to bring. Just have the conversation, provide people an environment where they feel comfortable to have the right decisions, to work in a way that is conducive both to them personally and to their business, to their environment, to society. And if we can shape this in a way that everybody benefits, then this is good for everybody. But like you say, don't, for what is ultimately a selfish reason, keep people away from things that maybe they should know, because it's going to backfire. You're not going to make the best decisions if people don't know what the consequences are.
Well, I will leave leave the conversation at that. Thanks to both of you for hanging in there. And we'll hang on for a moment or two in the back, Martin, before you have to leave. And I'll put myself here in the center. Thank you so much. Thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention. And thank you to Martin and to Michael for showing up and having a respectful and intelligent conversation. And hopefully it was valuable to you. See you next time on Riffing with